The Guadalupe Mountains National Park in West Texas is one of the hidden gems of the national park system. The park is located between El Paso, Texas and Carlsbad, New Mexico, and is the location of the most extensively exposed fossil reef in the world. It is best known for its icon, El Capitan, an impressive sheer-faced limestone mountain, and Guadalupe Peak at 8,752 feet, the highest point in Texas. Within its 80 miles of hiking trails, it contains a wide array of ecosystems, from relic pine forests to natural springs, desert terrain, and its beautiful canyons. The most famous of these, McKittrick Canyon, draws thousands of visitors each year to see its dramatic show of fall colors. When the park opened in 1972, it was approximately 76,000 acres. Almost from its inception, the park was interested in acquiring 10,000 additional acres to the west. It was interested in this land because it provided access to the west side of the park and offered dramatic views of the reef's geological structure. Also, there were important archaeological sites that offered insight into the ancient people that lived here many thousands of years ago. And perhaps most important, it contained several thousand acres of gypsum dunes. These were the second largest gypsum dunes in the United States, the White Sands National Monument being the largest. Gypsum dunes are rare, and it takes a special set of circumstances for them to form. This area is an endorheic basin, meaning there is no outlet for any water that gets in. Any minerals that accumulate have no place to go. Obviously, there is a high gypsum content, and there are Playa Lakes to the west of the dunes. Playa Lakes are simply areas that hold water for just brief periods of time and are usually very shallow, not more than a few inches. Because of the rapid evaporation, the unusually light mineral is left on the surface. Texas is one of the windiest states, and this county one of the windiest in Texas. The wind sweeps across the dried Playa Lakes, picking up the gypsum and carries it towards the mountain. The mountain serves as a natural barrier, slowing down the wind and making it drop the sand grains. It forms into dunes, some of which can be more than 60 feet tall. Eventually, the park acquired the land. Most of the property owners were from Del City, a small incorporated city about 50 miles to the west of the visitor center. Del City was founded in the late 40s after the discovery of water. It is said it was named after the old children's ditty, Farmer in the Dell. As you would expect of a small ranching and farming community of this size, the downtown is tiny, with one bar, a post office, a hardware store, and a few restaurants. Though Del City is not without its surprises. Occasionally, you might run into one of the few dozen free-roaming emus, the result of a failed ranching enterprise. However, usually you'll find farming equipment, remote farmhouses, and cultivated land. It was here we caught up with Jim Lynch, the single largest holder of land that was acquired by the park. He talks about his family coming to Del City and their relationship to the Salt Basin dunes.
Both of my parents were born in Ireland and immigrated to this country around the first of the last century. Came by steamship, of course, and came across the country and worked in San Francisco for 2 years in order to get enough money to go to the Alaskan gold fields. That was back in the early days, the first 8 or 10 years of the last century, and he spent about 10 or so years in Alaska in the gold mining business. And he did quite well, and from there came down and established some ranching and farming operations in northern Mexico. And then, of course, from that point, he had 3 separate locations in Central California up through the late 40s. In California, we had always had 5,000 to 6,000 acres of crops, and we had visions of improving that situation, and we had plans to develop this property into about 20,000 acres of irrigated farming. On the rangeland, the more rough terrain, we put livestock, cattle. Even though we did run cattle in the area, that we knew that from a cattle ranching standpoint, the White Dune area would not be particularly of great value. Of course, we did know that the gypsum dunes and the gypsum of the area would be one day an economic asset. The people in Del City did feel like that first it would be very desirable to preserve the white sand dunes. It was a very special place, a very favorable portion of the ranch property, and we have an extended family that live in all areas of the country, and of course most all of them have visited here many, many times, and we're always thrilled with the idea of being on the dunes. They were so unique and so unusual. It was a very in a way, a sad affair to give it up, but the consolation was that we knew it would be preserved from now on, and that was, in long-term thinking, that was our wish.
Long before the dunes were acquired by the park, there was interest in preserving them by a number of different organizations. The most important of these was the Nature Conservancy, and in 1979, the Texas chapter issued an initial study proposing their acquisition and actively seeking funding. In 1982, to their surprise and delight, the estate of one Dorothy Groom bequeathed a bit over 200 acres in the heart of the dunes to the Conservancy. At least part of the dunes was now preserved for future generations to come. Jim and Mary Lynch had 3 daughters, Peggy, Bonnie, and Linda, and they all grew up in Del City at the foot of the Guadalupe Mountains. The youngest daughter, Linda, grew up to pursue a career in art. She eventually moved to New York City, where her minimalist abstract art was well received and even displayed in the Metropolitan Museum of Modern Art. In 1983, she put her career on hold to return to Del City to help form a conservation group, the Hudspeth Directive for Conservation. Its main purpose was to stop the construction of a nuclear waste facility in the county. Her efforts were fully supported by her family, including Bonnie lobbying in Austin. The group's efforts started to receive media attention, and they were successful in stopping the plant. In 1994, the Conservancy, in an effort to support the small environmental group and broaden their appeal, and because of Linda's personal connection, deeded them their holdings in the dunes. We caught up with Linda at the Lynch Ranch, and she explains the connection between art and conservation.
It's not so much that you learn to let go when a work of art is finished, but it's even letting go of the process while one is working. And in conservation, the big full circle, if you have, I think, an opportunity to gain any wisdom from the experience of working to conserve a place, is ironically letting go of it, because there is ultimately no finite influence that you will ever have on a place. You hope that your efforts will guide future people who have the capacity to continue to caretake. If you have taken it up to this point, then perhaps others will carry on, hopefully inspired by what you've accomplished to point. But you must at some point realize that it's beyond your control, as is everything, as is the success or failure of a great work of art. So they are both, to use that phrase, perhaps great works of art.
When you visit the dunes, perhaps you can use your imagination to create your own abstract art in your mind's eye. When Guadalupe Mountains National Park opened, the superintendent of the Carlsbad Caverns managed both parks. This did not change until 1987, when Karen Wade was hired as the park's first standalone superintendent. It was under her watch that the process to acquire the dunes began. The process was made complicated because the land to be acquired was owned by a number of different people. Negotiations had to be made separately with each owner. As a result, the process took quite some time. Larry Henderson, the second park superintendent, took over in 1990, and it was under his tenure that this complicated acquisition was finally completed.
The process was underway, and it took me a little while before I really started to get involved in that process because it was moving slowly, but it was moving, and I had other things to do, just learning the park and dealing with the day-to-day operations of managing the park. But as we got into things, within the first year or so, we were in discussions with property owners. Jim and Mary Lynch and the Lynch family in Del City were the primary property owners. Of course, the Nature Conservancy owned a quarter section in the heart of the dunes. And it was a fascinating place, and one that we were excited to have gotten to the point where we could start to acquire the property.
The last of the hurdles was overcome, and the 10,000 acres was finally brought into the park in 1998. The first thing the park attended to was fencing in the area. This kept out the livestock and made it possible for the ecosystem to begin returning to its natural state. Also, now that the area was under park supervision, they could protect this unique area's resources from harmful activity and keep it in a natural and pristine condition. They say that some of our best adventures happen when we get off the beaten path. Such is the case with a visit to the Salt Basin Dunes. From the visitor center, it's about a 48-mile drive. Fortunately, the drive is pleasant, and along highways 62 and 180, you get some great views of the vistas surrounding the park. About 7 miles after the salt flat, you come to a well-marked intersection. You travel about 17 miles up Farm Road 1576, which takes you to Williams Road. Williams Road is an accessible gravel road, and after about 7.5 miles, you come to a locked park gate. Remember to check out a key at the visitor center. Another mile of dirt road gets you to a small parking area. From here, you can just make out the dunes in the distance. From the parking area, you'll find a well-maintained trail. As you hike in this last mile, you'll have great views of El Capitan and the reef. You could cut overland, but the best approach is to continue until you get to a sign indicating the way back to the parking lot. Here you'll see a trail leading into the dunes. As you pass over the crest of the hill into the dunes, you find yourself in a remarkable, distinctive, and beautiful environment. The vast expanse of white sand is impressive, and its tranquility and uncommon beauty are unmistakable. As you find your way through the dunes, you appreciate the special quality of the gypsum. Because it is so light, it feels different to the step, and it takes a bit of adjustment to get used to. Before long, you feel like an expert navigating around this beautiful landscape. As you explore the many facets of the dunes, it is easy to get disoriented. If this happens, just find a high point where you can see El Capitan. This can serve as your landmark, and with it in view, you'll know exactly where you are. Remember, the White Dunes covers about 2,000 acres. From the sparse Big Dunes to the vegetative-rich plains and everything in between. Surrounding the Gypsum Dunes is another kind of sand dune with a different mineral content. These are quartzose dunes. These have a slight reddish color because of their iron content. They are heavier and don't blow around as much, forming a bit more stable environment than the lighter gypsum. As you travel around in some of the flatter areas of the dunes, you will see a dark, almost soot-like substance. These are actually living colonies known as a cryptobiotic crust. They are a symbiotic association of lichen and fungi, and this forms the dark crust on the surface. Be careful not to walk on this surface, as it is very delicate and, like a coral reef, can take years to grow back if disturbed or damaged. Over time, this is helping to stabilize the soil and allow new plants to take root. Temperature shifts in the dunes can be extreme, but even with these harsh conditions, there are a variety of plants that have adapted to this dry, hot environment. One of the more successful plants is the soap tree yucca, so named because they used to make soap from its roots. But throughout the landscape, you'll find a wide array of plants. Some are more delicate than you would expect to find in such a demanding place. Though an occasional beetle is the only creature you're likely to see, there are many species that call this area home. There are spiders, scorpions, lizards, mice, snakes, coyotes, jackrabbits, and more. Chances are that you'll not see any of these, as they tend to come out at night. What you will see is evidence of their existence. For example, you'll see many holes in the ground. These are entrances to their underground homes, where they escape the daytime heat. Also, you'll see their tracks in the sand. From large to small, they paint a picture of predator and prey that gets played out each night after the sun goes down. Pictures alone cannot do the Salt Basin Dunes justice. This is a place that must be experienced firsthand. It is one of those rare places that inspires you to slow down and opens you up to a different perspective. As you become acclimated, you get tuned into the details of the surroundings and learn to appreciate its more subtle beauty. One of the real special times at the dunes is just before the sun goes down. The light turns golden, and the details of the windswept terrain come into focus. This is especially great for photographers. It is almost impossible to point your camera in any direction and not get a great photograph. As the sun goes down and you make your way back to the parking lot, you know you have experienced someplace special. As you head home, the creatures of the dunes come out from their lairs and lay claim to what is rightfully theirs.